Well, hello, I'm John Fisher, and it is the 10th of June, 2022. We're still in our series on Gideon and the story of Gideon, and our title for the catch today that I'll be reading is Our Fragile Faith. This is one of the more well known parts of the story of Gideon. If you went to Sunday school as a kid, or even if you didn't, you probably have heard of the story of the fleece. We even have a popular idiom about what to do if you're not sure about a particular decision you have to make. You should put out a fleece. As the inevitable confrontation with their enemies grew closer, Gideon became increasingly anxious about making sure that God was going to be with him. The numbers were alarming. The Midianites and their allies, who were readying for battle in the valley below the hill country where the children of Israel were hiding, numbered 135,000 men, and Gideon would never have more than 32,000, though he would end up with less, much less. It's no wonder Gideon was a little worried and wanted to make sure God had done his math. So he devised a way that God could assure him of his presence. Now remember, God had told Gideon when he called him, I will be with you. Well, that should have been good enough, but Gideon, like us, is human and still doubting. So he put a fleece of wool out one night and asked God to prove he was God and still with him by making the fleece wet with dew overnight and the ground around it dry. And the next morning, Gideon wrung a bowl full of water out of the wool while the ground was totally dry. But then the next night, Gideon said, Please don't be angry with me, but let me make one more request. Let me use the fleece for one more test. This time, let the fleece remain dry while the ground around it is wet with dew, which is exactly what God did. Now, Gideon was walking a thin line here. The scriptures say in Deuteronomy 6:16 and quoted by Jesus to the devil in the wilderness in Luke 4:12, you must not test the Lord your God. So God is being extremely patient and gracious with Gideon here, and that is good to know with all our struggles with doubt and unbelief. Quote, for he knows how weak we are, he remembers we are only dust. Psalm 103:14. This is not a story that teaches us how to find out God's will or test whether the Lord is with us. Some people will try all sorts of things to determine God's will for a big decision, turning any number of things into make believe fleeces, make this or that happen. This is not seeking the Lord, it is superstition. But it is a story that shows us how God understands our weakness and is gracious and patient with our fragile faith. He remembers that we are only dust. This is John Fisher for the catch of the day, Grace Turned Outward.